Oh, hello there, Yoroshiku. Hello. It is me, Haruka. Hello, I am back. I am returned for more of this, more of Witch on the Holy Night. It's been a bit, because the past 2 Wednesdays I was playing Repo with Nyx. So I've been out of this for a little while, but it is what it is. I'm back now. So yeah, I'm gonna be continuing from where we left off. We just did chapter 1 last time. We just did the beginning of the game. So yeah, gonna be continuing from where we left off last time. Hi. Little happening of last night. And boom. Next episode. 2. A little happening of last night.
Kedo, 慣れれば割と住みやすいとは思う。
The big city. Sojiro sighed listlessly. He looked down at the winter schoolyard below, lost in thought. December was written on the corner of the chalkboard. He could not believe 10 days had already passed since he transferred to the school. The last vestiges of autumn had faded with the change of the month. The trees were all but barren, and the ground below them a mat of fallen leaves. Fourth period was classics. An elderly teacher stood at the lectern and rambled on. While he had finally gotten used to the classroom, he still had a long way to go to get up to speed in his classes. Lacking even the basic understanding most students learn in their early scholastic life, it was a battle for Sojiro to keep up. I can imagine. Even if he was unable to grasp all of the content right away, he at least tried to memorize everything in the hope that he could make use of it down the road. Which is why losing himself in his thoughts was about the last thing he should have been doing. He would normally chastise himself for daydreaming, but troublingly, he was unable to concentrate in class today. Oof. Sojiro could not place the source of his lack of concentration. Could not have been the winter in the city. It was much milder than in the mountains. Neither was his part-time job particularly tiring. He was not any more physically fatigued than the average student, so that could not be it either. Others might conclude that it was because the courses were boring, but that seemed off the mark too. Sojiro did not share his classmates' opinion about their classes. On the contrary, he rather enjoyed his class time. No, his frame of mind was not to blame either. Trying to figure out what was wrong only made him more depressed. Damn. I mean, I used to be distracted quite easily in school too. He scolded himself and turned his attention to the chalkboard. The rhythmic ticks of the chalk were sending him into a slumber, but he somehow managed to resist their lullaby. I mean, this soothing music can probably put me to sleep. And I say that and the music is gone. Great, thank you. And yet, he was still unable to focus on the class. Sojiro reflected silently, as was his custom, and sighed inwardly. Deep down, he knew the real source of his agitation. The events of the previous night were the only thing it could be. The event of the previous night. With a chime to signal the end of class, the teacher bowed and exited into the hallway. To see him off, the 30 or so students all stood up from their desks. The clock, which had seemed to slow dramatically around 11:30, now struck noon. The tension seemed to fade from the room all at once. The release from a difficult lesson was the start of lunchtime, the highlight of school life. Hell yeah! Misaki High's cafeteria was not particularly known for its quality of food. Complaints that the quality was below that of a private school went unheeded, and the same unique flavors appeared on the menu each and every day. Private school prices coupled with subpar quality led the majority of students to opt for box lunches instead. Makes sense. Sojiro's class 2C was no exception. The boys muscled as many as 10 desks into what resembled a long dining table. Conversely, the girls divided themselves into smaller tables of 2 or 3 desks with practice ease and started chatting with their cliques. Not a single student wasted even a second of their precious lunchtime. Where both sides differed in method, they shared a common goal. Sojiro was struck dumb by the efficiency of the transformation. Even after 10 days, he was unable to keep pace with the rest of the class and remained seated where he had sat during the previous period.
Oi! Kochikoyo, Shizuki!
Oh. The voice came from the large makeshift dining table near the window. Hosuke Kinomi was beckoning him over while leaning back in his chair in a way that looked like he could fall backward at any second. Yeah, I know that move. Take pity on him and trade him for something better. The two of them worked at the same restaurant, so he was one of the few people Sojiro knew before starting school. Oh, so that's why they're friends. Was also the reason Sojiro was able to learn the true meaning of the phrase "can't live with them, can't live without them."
Oh, いいな。Shizuki も来いよ。今日は待ちに待った缶詰祭りをすっからさ。
The what in the what now?
ついに結婚するのかよ。誰か冷静になった方がいいんじゃないのか。
バカ、すげえ楽しいってきっと。そりゃパチモン臭いけど、カニ缶とか食い放題なんだぜ。サバ缶じゃなくて。
マジ？やったー！俺も参加する。コンビーフは一人一個？それとも早い者勝ち？
お前な、一人で何個も食えるもんじゃねえぞあれ。うまいのは最初の一個だけだって。
しずきたちが来るならノルマは一人7個に下がるのか。助かるな。
ところで木の実の弁当の中身、なんか缶詰より硬そうじゃね？
The boys usually passed the time by making fun of each other's lunches, but today they were united against a common foe. A pyramid of countless cans stood in the middle of the table. They had all been taken from the pantry of a certain student's house, and the expiration dates on them had all been scribbled out with a marker. Them.
よし、やろうども。各自毎缶きりの用意はいいな。食べるも地獄、残すも地獄。我ら5次元目の授業はないものと恐れぬ修羅となり、鉄の悪魔どもを平らげん。食材は下町の何でも紹介、マーケット中山からの提供です。
ヒュー！バカも休み休みイエーイ！
Okay, the boys united as one and hoisted their can openers into the air.
ほら、しずきも食べようぜ。缶切りならまだあるからさ。
He doesn't seem too thrilled about it.
いや、君らの弁当の毒味はごめんだって昨日言ったはずだ。それに、その缶詰半分以上賞味期限切れてるだろ。
なんだよ、釣れねえな。
Quite an inexplicably excited group of guys. Their real motivation seemed to be to spread the pain. Why suffer alone when you can suffer with other people? But moved by their energy and condescending defeat, Sojiro got up from his seat and joined them. And before he could...
じゃあ、私たちが釣り上げようかな。しずきくん、あんなの放っておいて一緒にどう？
Another interested party joined the fray. A girl with short but stylish hair had called out to him. I can't English. She had also tried to get Sojiro to join the track and field club several days earlier.
いや、 そっちも遠慮したいな、できれば。
Damn. He answered with a troubled look on his face. On their table was nothing but a pile of fruits Sojiro had never seen before.
なんで？パパイヤとか嫌い？マンゴーもあるし、ヤシの実だってあるし、内緒だけど、夕張メロンもあるんだから。
Why'd you get all that in a school? The members of the fruit group bumped their fists in unison at that last delicacy.
待て、なんだヤシの実ってあれ食えるもんなの？
You can, yeah.
マンゴー余ったら回してほしいな。
バカ、肉食え肉。そんなんだから貧弱な体してんだぞお前ら。
Damn. Sojiro couldn't keep track of all the voices flying across the room.
わかるのはどっちも破滅的だってことだけだ。
That being said, he found it difficult to refuse them outright. His tendency to accept others' goodwill at face value occasionally left him frozen with indecision. Not accustomed to regular human interaction, he was unable to judge when it was or was not appropriate to turn someone down. Someone tapped the lost little lamb on the shoulder.
ほっとけほっとけ。いちいちここのバカどもに付き合ってちゃ人生台無しだ。適当に流しとけばいいんだよ。ほら、お前らもな、善良な羊を悪の園に引きずり込んでんじゃねえよ。
An inappropriately loud voice echoed throughout the classroom from behind him.
副会長、
Vice President. Sojiro turned around to see a boy about a head taller than him. His long hair, while uncapped, had been brushed back, giving it an appealing, windswept look. His attractive features belied the contempt for the classroom his eyes carried. Unlike the perpetually dopey-looking Sojiro, he was an extremely attractive boy, capable of captivating anyone who so much as glanced at him. Damn! In most cases, such a boy's presence would be met with awe and respect. However... Damn, there's a motorcycle outside. However...
なんだよ、副会長様のお出ましかよ。
てめえらのバカ顔にはコリゴリだって学食に陣取ってたんじゃなかったのかよ。
へへへ。ここは見ての通り、ボンクラどもが集う貧民街でございますよ。王子はほら、A組の綺麗どころとカフェでお茶でもしてればいいじゃない。
またしずき呼びに来たのかよ。青子女子といい、飛び丸殿下といい。しずき、なんかヤバいことしちゃったのか。
Damn.
しずきくんは高速違反しないじゃん。ちょっとそれ以外のルール破るだけで。ってことはやっぱり築地くん、青崎に振られてからそっちに走ったって本当だったのね。
They continued to give him a hard time. Sojiro could not help but feel sorry for him. The class vice president, on the other hand, showed absolutely no reaction whatsoever. Yeah, I can tell. He glared at them with a bored look and simply raised his voice.
相変わらず無駄に元気があって結構じゃねえかてめえら。
Damn.
そんなに活力たぎってんなら冬季特別清掃班にだって参加できるよな。おい、今んところ自主的に申し出てるのは全校で一人しかいねえんだ。西井全員が参加すりゃ俺も青崎も肩の荷が下りるってもんなんだがよ。
The menacing growl in his voice contrasted greatly with the boy's well-constructed looks. Both Tin Canned and Tin Fruit's words were dulls like a fire being smothered. This was partly due to their fear of the boy, but mostly due to their fear of the special winter cleaning team. Yes, the special winter cleaning team. Joining meant spending part of their winter break cleaning up the old school building and mountainous rear courtyard that had been neglected by the previous two student councils. Was a form of legalized torture that could potentially ruin 3 whole days of their winter break. Damn. Don't forget about any compensation in the form of extra credits. No, it was pointless volunteer work for a student council project. It was practically a miracle that they had found even a single volunteer.
いや僕らちょっと体弱いんでスミッチョで缶詰食べてますね。
私たちも貧血気味でこうやって果物食べてないと死んじゃうっていうか 冬休みはもう予定いっぱいっていうか。
Yeah, sure. Of the students, but one scuffled away.
よし、昼食はやっぱり静かにやらねえとな。1年坊主の教室より2年の教室の方がやかましいなんて苦情、いい加減にしやがれよ、アホども。
Hold on. The mob meekly scurried away. Sojiro turned to join them, but as he did,
あ、お前はこっちだ、宗次郎。ちょい顔貸せ。
the hand on his shoulder held him in place.
だよ、生徒会応募。人んちのテーブルマナーまで指図してほしくねえよな。
Kenomi cursed him under his breath to his friends the second the vice president turned to go.
はあ、
Huh?
上等じゃねえか、木の実。いいぜ、お前が記念すべき2人目だ。
Damn.
冬休み、首を洗って待ってやがれ。
The vice president must have heard everything Kenomi said, because he gave a thumbs up before figuratively jabbing it in his eye.
はあ、何言ってんですかあいつ。あれ自主的なイベントじゃん。いくら副会長だって強制はできないですよね。
True. The problem child of Class C laughed merrily.
そりゃ昨日までの話だ。会長の提案が学校側に受理されてな。本日付で生徒会役員は強制力のある推薦権をもらえたんだよ。特に会長と副会長の推薦は絶対だ。拒否した場合、学校側はともかく青崎が何するか俺には止められねえから、そのつもりでな。
Damn.
げえ、それ事実上の死刑宣告じゃん。生徒会マジ応募。
That's rough, buddy. Kinomi's terrified shrieking continued behind them as the vice president and Sojiro left the classroom. That's rough, buddy.
お前も大変だな、宗十郎。
あんたも割と暇なんだな、副会長。
Oh. The two entered the empty student council room. Misaki High's student council had the use of two rooms. One was a large office specifically made for the student council. The second was an archive room, once used as a preparatory office for math courses. As the latter of the two, the walls were lined with densely packed shelves, making an already cramped room seem even more confined. For this reason, it served more as a private refuge to the student council. The two students sat across from one another. Tobimaru Tsukiji. He was the son of the chairman of Misaki High School and the vice president of his school council. Like Sojiro, he was in his second year and first met the transfer student a week earlier when the task of looking after him was dumped onto the student council.
副会長はやめろって。クソったれな話だが、俺は所詮会長の犬だからな。
Oof. As self-deprecating as his words were, he hardly seemed dissatisfied with the arrangement. He took a snack from his pocket and grimaced at it before taking a bite. The 100-calorie energy bar sacrificed flavor for efficacy, but somehow not enough to prevent him gnawing on it like a piece of jerky.
そうか。でも犬は良くないな、飛び丸。
Sojiro sat in the chair with a concerned look on his face.
あ？犬がどうしたって？
犬は良くないって言った。例えが違う気がするし、何より怖いぞ、あれ。
なんだよ。山奥育ちのくせに犬が怖いのか？
そりゃ大抵の生き物は怖いけど、犬は別格だ。徒党を組んだ野犬ほど始末に追えないものはない。足の速さも脅威だけど、何より執念深すぎる。
Makes sense.
坂だろうと追いかけてくるし、最後の一匹になるまで引かないんだぞ。
Sojiro opened his lunch as he spoke. Inside the bright green cloth, 3 beautifully made triangular rice balls. Rice balls? Onigiri.
ショックって何が？
いや、そんなこの世のものとは思えない握り飯を見たのは初めてだ。
思わず絶句しちまった。
それどっちなんだ？
褒めてるんだよ、バカ。
Baka. Sojiro was always confounded by praising that could be interpreted in multiple ways. Euphemisms and subtle sarcasm were often lost on him. It was only on rare occasions, like this one, that he chose to confirm what was being said. Tobimaru had come to suspect that Sojiro had a very black and white way of seeing things.
ところで、その固まった小麦粉みたいなの、美味しいのか？
Sojiro stared at the energy bar with a curious look on his face.
まずくはねえが、うまくもねえよ。まあ、試してみる分には止めねえが。人間、何事も手間暇惜しむようになっちゃおしまいだぜ。ことが三大欲求ならなおさらだ。
Tobimaru quickly finished off his bar, put another one on the table, and grabbed one of Sojiro's rice ball. Sojiro failed to notice the rudeness of the forced exchange and gave the preferred energy bar a try.
なんだか土を食べてるみたいだ。
Damn.
違いない。遊びをなくせば人生こんなもんだって見本だな。
Out of principle, Sojiro labored over his energy bar, cringing all the while. He was both curious of the unknown and loath to leave something unfinished.
今無理に平らげる必要はねえぞ。そいつの利点は携帯食ってところだからな。素で味気ないが、食えるうちは味が落ちないのがいいところだ。まあ、そっちはともかく。どうだ、少しは慣れたか？
ああ、飛丸や青崎が気を使ってくれているからね。
Tobimaru turned his eyes up to the ceiling, unable to handle Sojiro's carefree smile. As absent-minded as Sojiro might have been, his expressions were nonetheless incredibly earnest. It was like poison to someone as self-absorbed as Tobimaru.
だから青崎は来ねえんだよな。
He took a bite from the rice ball to steer himself away from such thoughts. Though now cold, the rice had managed to maintain its freshness, startling Tobimaru.
ん？いや待て。気を使ってんのは俺だけじゃねえか。青崎なんて。
Damn.
お前が転入した日に彼迷惑だから見張ってての一言だけだぞ。
なんでそこで君が怒るんだ？
いや、だからだな。お前が学校になれるよう陰ながら見守ってんのは俺で、青崎は生徒会室で全校生徒の弱みを集めてるだけって話だ。面倒な苦労してんのは俺だけじゃねえかって。
Tobimaru stopped himself, realizing how ridiculous it sounded. Sojiro, rightly so, knew it was nothing to get this upset over.
いいさ。青崎に言いつけられなきゃこうなることもなかったしな。知ってるか？あいつどうして俺にこんな役させたと思う？
副会長だからだろ。
Tobimaru's handsome face went dark.
あのな、どうして副会長が転入生一人にかかりっきりにならなくちゃいけねえんだよ。いいぜ。機会があったら青崎本人に聞いてみな。あいつの本性がわかるからよ。
He snatched another bite of the rice ball while grumbling under his breath. There it was again, rice grains that were just dry enough to be fresh and tender in the mouth, a morsel that betrayed its humble description, which must have been delicately molded by a master chef rather than haphazardly clumped into a bowl.
そして何よりこの塩加減、中の具から染み出した玄妙な醤油加減はどうだ。食欲をそそるどころか脳を食欲だけにするような。
Damn. Must be a really good rice ball then.
飛丸、思ってることが口に出てるみたいだけど。
いや、それほどのショックだったってわけだ。なあ、その字。これ具はなんだ？
It was only natural to inquire about the unexpectedly delicious bite. He had been nibbling around the edges and had not yet reached the center.
ああ、それはイナゴ。
Eh?
ありえね
The vice president choked on his cough. He had assumed that Sojiro would prefer earthly ingredients instead of seafood on account of his mountain life, but he never expected he would use grasshoppers.
くそ食う前に言えよな信じられねえぐらいうまいと思っちまったじゃねえか
ああ、今のは嘘だよ。
Damn. They locked eyes for a moment.
本当は鮭。いくらなんでもイナゴはね。
Damn, you got jokes.
おおそうだよないや安心したいくらなんでもイナゴはねえよな
ああ、こんな都会で身の締まったイナゴが手に入るもんか。
So that's the problem. As curious as those words were, Tobimaru decided to let them go.
たくどっちにしても冗談きついぜ危うく吐き出すところだったじゃねえか
君が青崎の悪口を言うからだ。
Oh damn. Sojiro closed his eyes and as he continued to chew on his rice bowl. Tobimaru watched incredulously as Sojiro made no attempt to hide his disapproval.
おい今のはさすがに聞き捨てならねえぞ俺が青崎の悪口を言ったから意種返しをしたとそういうことかな
Sojiro continued chewing. The country boy's silent protest said all that needed to be said. The vice president suddenly looked like he had been struck by lightning.
なんてこったお前まさか青崎に惚れてんのかそうなのかそうなんだなおい眠ってねえで起きろ
Tobimaru flew out of his chair and violently shook Sojiro by the shoulders. Sojiro opened his eyes.
そうかお前は1年前の惨劇を知らないんだな知ってりゃそんなストレートな破滅願望を持つこともなかったろうに
君の言葉には誤解が含まれてるけど、それは後にする。それより1年前の惨劇って？
Tobimaru regained his composure and sat down after a moment's thought.
仕方ねえこの手の噂をするのは好きじゃねえんだけどな
Tobimaru reassured himself that it was in Sojiro's best interest as a young man to know.
あれは青崎がまだ1年の頃の話だあの頃はみんな入学したばっかりで青崎がどんな性格か誰も知らなかったあいつ外見は文句なしに美人だからなそりゃ男どもは狂気乱舞したもんさ
Little did they know that soon after they would go crazy for an entirely different reason.
4月5月はもう上を下への大騒ぎだよあの時ばかりは上級生も下級生もなかったな野郎同士の牽制共闘果ては決闘までまあよくも騒いだもんさ青崎に近寄るだけでも大変だったんだぜ
なんでそんなよくわからない事態になるんだ？
そりゃ青崎は一人きり命知らずな野郎は延べ100人ほどいたからだよ一人一人青崎とランチしても3ヶ月かかるだろ
Damn.
だからまずは男同士でつまんねえ暗闘があったのさまあいいわからねえならそこは飛ばそう所詮負け犬どもの話だしな本筋にはなりえねえでなそんなどうでもいい戦いを勝ち残った奴らは列なしで1年の女に言い寄ったわけだ青崎はあれでなんていうか相手のなけなしの誠意じゃなくてあれか勇気そういうのを無視できずに認めちまうやつだからな言い寄ってくる相手を 可能な限り丁寧に断ってた。が中にはそれで勘違いしちまうやつもいたよ。3年のある野郎がこれは脈ありと見て青崎に何度も言い寄ったんだよ。多分そいつ頭がおかしかったんだ。今にして思うとそうとしか思え。
Damn. Incidentally, Tobimaru decided to gloss over the fact that his student was also the former student council president. Oh.
学園ばかりか。青崎の家まで押しかけたそうでな。
Oh, that's bad.
あまりにしつこいんで青崎も堪忍袋の尾が切れたんだろう。ちょっと口にするのははばかられる方法で振ったんだよ。結果、そいつは自分から他校に転入希望したばかりか、三崎町からも逃げ出しちまって、青崎も1ヶ月ばかり自宅謹慎を食らった。世に言う血の公会堂事件だ。詳しく知りたけりゃ本人はまずいな。新聞部にでも行け。あそこの部長は命知らずだから聞けば面白がって教えてくれる。
飛び丸、その具体的な表現を故意に避けてないか。
仕方ねえだろ。理事長の息子だろうがなんだろうが怖いものは怖えし、高校ぐらいは無事卒業しとかねえとな。うちの女子の制服見るたびに規制を上げるトラウマなんて持ちたくねえよ。
Sojiro tilted his head on the side in confusion. Tobimaru had lost him with that comment.
ああ、いい。それよりなんで青崎なんかがいいんだよ、宗次郎。
He tilted his head again, this time to the other side.
おい、お前、本当に青崎が好きなのか？単に胸がドキドキ言ってるだけなら、それは恋じゃなくて恐怖だってオチもあるぜ。いくらその字がぼんやりでも理由ってもんがあるだろう。
He tilted his head even further. What Tobimaru was saying sounded off, but Sojiro decided not to press the matter. All the more because he found many of his own emotions towards Aoko Ozaki to be incomprehensible.
そうだな、おかしい。俺はあまり彼女を知らないのにね。
That was because they had not truly spoken to each other since the day she showed him around. Every time Sojiro tried to talk to her, she immediately got up and left. As fate would have it, they ended up working together that recent Sunday, but made only idle chatter on the way back.
けど飛び丸、君は知らないだけなんだ。
Oh.
時々なんだが、誰かの視線を感じて振り返ってみると、いつ失敗するかを心配して見ている人がいる。飛び丸の言う通り、ただ廊下で俺を見かけて単に監視していただけなのかもしれない。本当は俺のことなんて気にせず素通りしたいのかもしれない。けどどんな種類であれ彼女の心配は本物だ。それにここが一番大事だと思うんだけど、実際の話、青崎のそういうところのおかげで俺は助かっていたりするんだ。
His tone was measured and sincere. Tobimaru sighed with a tinge of regret. If not for those words, he could have introduced Sojiro to a more suitable girl with whom he could have lived out the rest of his school days in peace. He never went to such lengths for his other friends. Generally speaking, if he was of some benefit to him, he was unafraid of exploiting another. If they were of no use, he didn't bother getting involved with them. That was how Tobimaru Tsukiji operated. Sojiro happened to be the type of person who provided no benefit to Tobimaru, yet somehow sparked in him a desire to help. It was not that friendship was completely alien to him. He just did not have many people he felt that close to. So if Sojiro had really fallen for Aoko, it was not his place as a friend to try to change his mind.
やれやれ。結局 惚れてるやつには理由なんていらねえんだな。
そんなことはない。理由なら一つある。彼女を一目見たときに綺麗だなって思ったぞ。
ん？
え Tobimaru's shoulder slumped.
なんだなんだけ恥ずかしいセリフ言っといて、要は外見に惚れてますな。結局見てくれかよ、宗次郎。
綺麗なものに見とれるのはいいことじゃないのか？自分を綺麗に見せる努力をしているんだから、外見から内面を判断するのはそんなおかしな話じゃないと思う。
That sounded like a sophism to Tobimaru when he had no counterpoint to offer.
しょうがねえ。わかったよ。この話はもうやめよう。その字が誰をてめえの女にするか、俺の知ったことじゃねえし。
Now, Tobimaru was mistaken about one major point during this whole conversation. Namely, the soldier was not head over heels in love with Aoko and hoped to go steady with her. He merely liked her as a person. Nobody could have foreseen the massive calamity that would be caused by this simple misunderstanding. Oh, brother.
だがよ、一つだけ忠告しておくぜ、宗次郎。青崎は喧嘩をした相手だろうと別に嫌うわけじゃない。逆に言えば親切にしたって別に好かれるわけでもない。いい例が俺だ。
He spoke with a pained sigh as if opening old wounds from the past.
そうか。詳しく。
おう、昔な、あいつがあんまりに独善的だったんで、つい手を挙げかけちまったことがある。半年前の夏だ。1年もあいつと生徒会やってたもんだから、俺も女っつうより戦友って気になってたな。つい勢いで平手打ちをしようと右手を上げた。我ながら4番バッターも各やという腰のひねり。確かな実感とともに俺は勝利を確信したもんさ。
He had a distant look in his eyes as his words trailed off.
翌日になって、こりゃ完全に敵扱いされたなと覚悟して生徒会室に行ってみりゃ、青崎はいつも通りだった。で、以来あいつと俺は会長と副会長で収まってる。
Sojiro sighed at his story. He then said with absolute confidence,
今の話を総合すると、君は単にのろけたいのか？
Clearly, he had missed the point entirely.
なわけあるか今の話のどこに甘酸っぱい要素があんだよ俺としちゃ、あいつを女として見なくなった決定的な事件だったんだがね。
なんだ、違うのか？
A look of disappointment filtered across Sojiro's face. Tobimaru revised his opinion. Sojiro was something of a simpleton, but there was a quality to him that Tobimaru could not quite place.
とにかくだ、俺が言いたいのは、青崎青子の好き嫌いの基準ってのは普通じゃないってことだ。いいことをすれば好かれる、気に入らないことをすれば嫌われるってわけじゃねえんだよ、あのお姫様は。
Sojiro answered that he would keep it in mind as he looked to the clock. They had been talking for a while and lunch was almost over.
もう君からの話はないか？
あ？初めからねえよ、そんなの。
Why had Tobimaru even brought him here in the first place? Sojiro tilted his head in wonder but shook it off to deal with the more pressing matters at hand.
よし。じゃあもう少し付き合ってくれ。飛丸に聞きたいことがあったんだ。
Tobimaru sat up straight, having never seen Sojiro's face look so serious before. Sojiro set aside his rifle and cleared his throat.
実は昨日こんなことがあって。
He spoke solemnly, and as carefully as possible, he recounted what had occurred the night before. Flashback time.
しずきくんいる？
It was 10 to 12 and lunchtime was quickly coming to an end. Her face popped into Class C, as lively as ever, as if it were an everyday occurrence. Aoko Ozaki announced her presence. While Aoko wasn't part of Class C, she didn't let it bother her as she casually entered the classroom. In contrast, the baby birds who had been so noisily chirping while eating lunch quickly quieted and began to rearrange their seats. Damn.
どういう意味よそれ。
She bristled internally before looking around the room. He could not see the male student she had come here to find. He hardly stood out, so she thought he might be hidden in a corner somewhere, but that appeared not to be the case.
有里くん、出席番号12番のしずきくんは？
Aoko kept her tone professional.
俺？しずきならさっき飛び丸殿下が連れて行ったよ。
Huh. The boy was shocked that she actually knew his name. One might think that the reason students referred to Tobimaru Tsukiji by a royal title was because he was the chairman's son, but it was because he actually acted like royalty. In fact, the vice president was said to have taken a liking to the title.
飛び丸が？あいつしずきくんと仲いいの？
She seemed surprised. The class seemed surprised at her surprise.
いいも悪いも、築地くんが男子と仲良く話してるのって今まで見たことなかったよ私たち。あ、木の実くんはバカだから別だけど。
そうだよな。初めは殿下もあんまり話してなかったけど、3日もしたら楽しそうに口喧嘩してたもんな。
ま、しずき相手に突っ張っても仕方ないじゃん。あいつ変だけどいいやつだし。
そうよね。いい人だもんね、宗十郎くん。
Having recomposed themselves, Class C started chatting again. Aoko listened for a bit before turning around and leaving the class with a later. Tick tock. All this Sojiro talk finished as quickly as it had started. Lunchtime was coming to a close in the student council room. Sojiro, having told his story, was smiling in satisfaction. Tobimaru, still sitting across from him, was frowning.
さあ、感想を聞かせてくれ。
Sojiro told his yarn as best he could. Tobimaru fingered his brow as if he was angry or concerned.
なあ、そうのじ。お前、人をバカにできるほど器用なやつじゃねえよな。
失礼な。器用な方だぞ俺は。
His response only confirmed Tobimaru's suspicions. It had to be one of two possible conclusions. That what Sojiro had just told him was true, or that Sojiro was so tired that he must have been hallucinating at the time. Tobimaru sincerely hoped it was the latter.
宗十郎、率直に言って俺はお前が気に入っている。嘘のない人間なんてのは人間じゃねえ。俺は人間嫌いだからそんなお前さんが気に入ってたりするんだが、そんなやつまで馬鹿げたことを言い出したら俺は明日から何を頼りに昼飯を食えばいいんだ。
学食で食べればいいんじゃないか。
Hearing his suggestion, Tobimaru's face darkened.
わかった。はっきり言おう。それは幻覚だ。幽霊の正体見たり枯れ尾花ってやつだろうさ。それでも納得いかないってんならいい精神科を紹介してやる。
それが君の感想か。よし、ならいいんだ。
Really nothing gets to this guy like them. As bitter as Tobimaru's word might have sounded to most, Sojiro swallowed them whole.
そりゃ俺だって神隠しの類だと思ったよ。けど都会じゃもしかしてそれもありなのかもしれないだろ。確かめたかったのはそこなんだ。
Oh, I see. Satisfied, Sojiro finished off his last rice bowl and neatly folded the cloth.
おい、すると何か？お前は都会の人間は口から火を吹いたり腕が伸びたりするのが普通だと思ったのか？
Oh, damn.
まあ普通じゃないけど、 特別でもないんじゃないかと思ったんだ。ここは山にないものが溢れている何でもありの場所だ。だからそれぐらいやってのける人だってもしかしているのかなと。
Makes sense. That his face was as serious as it was made Tobimaru realize just how big a culture shock Sojiro must have been experiencing. Living up in the mountains with no electricity, in a place where the night sky was at damn, I can't read. The night sky was as it always had been, where humans were just one more organisms in nature's garden. It makes sense that those conditions would create a boy like him. Damn, I'm struggling to read. The idea of children growing up so pure was an appealing one, but maybe it was natural to forego civilization when your population was so small. Or perhaps it was so simple a world that excessive knowledge was deemed irrelevant. It was precisely because city life offered him so much, and it was impossible up till now, that he had come to the conclusion that anything was possible here.
安心しろ。確かにこっちにはタチの悪い奴らばっかりだけどな。そんな魔法使いみたいな奴はいねえよ。
You would be surprised, actually.
そうだといいんだけど。
But Sojiro seemed unsure. And on Tobimaru's part, there were things to Sojiro's story that he found hard to swallow. Whether true or not, the incident Sojiro had described was disturbing.
まあ、事の真偽というか、どんな間違いでそう見えたかは置いておいてだ。結果だけ見れば、うちの生徒が夜の公園で人を殺したってことになる。しかも双方控えめに表現しても普通じゃねえ。
As a newcomer to town, Sojiro assumed that everyone his age was a student at his school. For better or worse, he was right.
一人は火炎放射器を持って、もう一人は、まあなんだ、なぎなたでも持ち出したのか、刃物らしきものが何メートルも伸びたときた。
Sojiro bobbed his head up and down as he listened to the disbelief in Tobimaru's voice. Hearing it repeated by someone else, he could see how someone might think he was taking them for a ride.
正気を疑うな。尋常じゃないぞその話。
I mean, that is quite the story.
お前、実は俺をからかってんだろ。
いや、全く。けどまあ、都会にはそんな人間はいないんだろ。なら飛び丸の言う通り、夢でも見てたんだ。ここのところアルバイトと試験が重なって辛くて。
Winter break was just around the corner, and the end of term exams were but a week away. Both were proving formidable opponents for Sojiro.
俺は基本ができてないから、人の倍程度の勉強じゃ追いつけない。ほら、勉強ばかりしているとノイローゼをするんだろ。
そりゃするんじゃなくてなるものだが、まあ、何にせよ、やりすぎ飲みすぎはよくねえわな。試験前ぐらいはバイト減らしたらどうだ？
減らしてはいるんだけどね。年末ってアルバイトを休む人も多くて、その代行も頼まれがちだし。
Oh. He shrugged helplessly. It was obvious from his words that he had been busy. Even if he was not going crazy, lack of sleep could have caused him to daydream, even if this all did go down in the middle of the night.
なんだか大変そうだな、操縦を。
That's right, but that's rough, buddy.
ああ、実はかなり参ってる。
Sojiro nodded with a pained look on his face. What was strange, however, was that he did not look the least bit tired.
泣き言言わねえのは感心するけどな。お前、新郎は顔に出ないたちか？ん？
そりゃ、新郎はどこも痛まないからね。
As he answered, Sojiro looked up at the clock on the wall. Lunchtime was almost over.
飛び丸、時間だ。
ああ、もうそんなに経ったか。気にせず先に行ってていいぜ。俺はまだ用があるからよ。
What the hell? The light on my room just flickered. Everything seems normal though. So we move on. Oh, it did it again. What the hell? Is my lamp dying or something? Anyways. Sojiro watched as Tobimaru made a gesture that seemed to lament the life of a student council member. His eyes looked as if they were looking at a piece of art and not understanding its value.
授業をサボれる身分っていうのは羨ましいな。そういうの、飛び丸が嫌いな手抜きじゃないのか？
そりゃ誤解も甚だしい。俺の欠席は手抜きじゃねえ。特権ってやつだと言ったろ。
The vice president angrily defended himself as he stood up. The transfer student merely gazed at him unfazed.
おいおい、あれだけ説明したのに全然分かってなかったのか。しょうがねえ。
しょうがねえ。
まず座れ。いいか、その字。常人を上回る英気と幸運を兼ね備えながら座することなく精進してきた俺でもここを卒業しちまえば裸一貫になっちまうんだぞ。ひでえ話だ。てめえの家柄を活用できんのはあと1年ちょいだけなんだぜ。これの一体どこが羨ましいってんだ。普通一生続くはずの親の七光ってやつが俺の場合はたった3年間しかねえんだからな。となりゃ有効なうちに使っておかなきゃもったいなくておちおち眠ってもいられねえ。ああ、嫌だ嫌だ。何が嫌かってバカどもとガン首並べて金勘定するのが嫌だ。たく嫉妬渦巻く大人の世界じゃ俺のオブラートみたいな心なんてパックリ飲まれて溶けちまうこと受け合いだろうさ。
Well, he must have been joking. Sojiro took his tone to be completely sincere. He listened as he envied Tobimaru's ability to be so open about his feelings. From his frame of reference, there was nothing he could do but take Tobimaru for his word. When...
そんな権利なんて留年すればいくらでも引き延ばせるのに。なんなら協力してあげましょうか。
The door to the student council room flew open, washing away Sojiro's half-hearted responses to his friend. This frosty statement destroyed the warm atmosphere of the room, and it also marked the abrupt end to Tobimaru Tsukiji's reign there.
いや、いい。自分の夢は自分の力だけで叶えようと常々思ってるんだ。
そ？なら今みたいな恥ずかしいこと力説しないでね。廊下にまで聞こえてたわよ、副会長さん。
Not missing a bit, Aoko Ozaki stepped inside the room. Her dark hair was slightly disheveled as if she had been running. Her gaze missed the sitting Sojiro entirely and was focused completely on the ranting vice president.
頑張れ、飛び丸。
頑張れ。Sojiro quietly got up to head back to his classroom.
割と薄情なんだな、お前って。
Tobimaru grumbled in front of Aoko.
だって時間がない。
だから、そういうのが薄情とだな。
He cut himself off. Aoko briefly shifted her gaze to Sojiro.
時間がないのは私も同じよ。あなたにはいつも振り回される。
Not a complaint. It was her honest opinion.
なんだ？要件は総十郎かよ。
安心なさい。あなたにもあるから。
Her eyes shimmered with a murderous glee. It was slightly different from the more sullen gaze to which Tobimaru had grown accustomed. For whatever reason, Aoko's mood seemed worse than usual.
しずきくん、あなた、走るのと泳ぐの、どっちが好き？
Aoko asked abruptly. Sojiro frowned a little before saying he was fine with either one.
ダメよ、一つにして。
泳ぐ方かな。けどどうして？
あなたがまだどこの部にも所属してないから。
A succinct reply, one that left no room for Sojiro to object.
うちの校則読んだわよね。生徒はただ一人の例外もなく部活動に参加しなくてはならない。正直どうかと思う校則だけど、決まりは決まりだから。
そんな無茶な。悪いけどそこまでの暇はないんだ。
でしょうね。
An equally terse response. She was typically to the point, but Tobimaru got the impression that she was expressly trying to keep her interaction with Sojiro short. They stared at each other in silence. Tobimaru stood breathlessly silent on the sidelines until Sojiro broke the impasse.
青崎は分かってると思ってた。あ、いや違う。きっと分かっているんだな。うん。だからそこが強いんだろうね。
Sojiro stood up from his seat. He walked past Aoko and into the hallway.
それ明日からでいいんだろ。
しずきくんがいいならね。
He did his best to force a smile before leaving the student council room. While watching the events play out, Tobimaru found himself deeply impressed with Sojiro. He could tell from Aoko's behavior that she was trying to get a rise out of Sojiro. Sojiro, on the other hand, didn't react. Heedless of what Aoko was doing, he simply went on his way. To Tobimaru, it was hard to believe that Sojiro had not taken offense. From his point of view, Sojiro's poker face had been the performance of a lifetime.
いや、でも何が強いんだろうな、会長。
He looked at Aoko curiously. Aoko stood completely still, staring at the wall. Damn.
青崎？
Aoko showed no response.
おい、会長。青崎。青子女子。おい、聞いてんのかよ、青崎青子。
さいはね、青を呼ぶな。
Her fury echoed across the student council room. It was a beautiful sound that could be heard into the hallway and made Tobimaru's rant from earlier pale in comparison.
やかましい。うるせえのはてめえも同じだ。
Perhaps her shouting was still ringing in his ears, or he was just the type to answer a shout with a shout, but he shot back reflexively.
そんなんだから男の一人もできねえんだよ、お前は。ほら、目覚めたか？
別にあなたの声は聞こえてた。煩わしかったから無視してただけよ。黙らせるの面倒だし。
てめえな、俺はカカなんかか、おい。
コミュニケーションが成立しない点で言えば、あっちのがまだ上品よね。
Damn.
ほう、その心は？
お互い何を言ってるかわからない。意味のない会話なら、仰せみたいなものでしょ。
Based on that statement, Aoko must have been under the assumption that dating was the act of two lovers whispering nonsense to each other.
問題は、お前にとって意味のある会話ってのがどの程度の価値かってことだが、まあいいか。いつになくきついじゃねえか、青崎。
ちょっとね。今愛嬌振りまける状況じゃないのよ。
不思議だ。この2年間で青崎の愛嬌なんてものは見たことがないんだが。
飛び丸のいない時に振りまいてたの。
そうかよ。やっぱりあの時のこと恨んでるんだろう、生徒会長さんはよ。
There was only one thing that Tobimaru could be thinking about. The incident that occurred in the student council room this past summer.
ずいぶんと昔の話じゃないそれ。そんなどうでもいいことに容量を使っちゃもったいないわよ。ただでさえ脳の覚醒部分が少ないのに。
As the conversation wore on, Aoko's murderous aura began to fade, and her sharp gaze gave way to a calmer demeanor rarely seen from her. It was quite possible that nobody besides Tobimaru had ever seen this side of her at school before.
ご忠告どうも。俺だってあんなことは忘れてよ。ただ、さっきその字がバカなこと言いやがるから、つい思い出しちまったんだよ。くそ、考えてみりゃ場所まで一緒じゃねえか。
Despite his ranting, his face betrayed a touch of nostalgia. Aoko, on the other hand, was scowling, can't read.
ちょっと待って。あの話、彼にしたの？
ああ、俺がてめえに、なんで会長になんか立候補したのよ。あんたは副会長って顔でしょ、どう見ても。なんて挑発されて、生涯最高の月をしたところまでな。
Aoko let out a sigh, as if relieved that Tobimaru had not told Sojiro the rest of the story. Even she wasn't sure why.
あれは確かにびっくりするぐらいいい月だった。思わず体が反応しちゃったもんね。ところで、私そんなこと言ったっけ？
言った。しかも俺が保健室に運ばれたのをこれ幸いと強引に副会長にしやがった。
Damn. Since that day, Tobimaru had served as the vice president to the person who'd usurped the role from him.
いいけどな。俺に会長職は合わねえって分かったし、副会長の方が性に合ってやがる。会長なんてやってたら危うく親父みたいな野郎になってただろうしよ。
プライド高い分、できることは全部やるからね、飛び丸は。会長職に先進するあまり、気がついたら優等生になってたあんたも見たかったけど。
やめてくれ、ゾッとしねえ。猫かぶるのはお前だけで十分だ。
Tobimaru shooed Aoko away like an annoying pest. It was a typical example of the crude verbal abuse they exchanged on a daily basis, with a wittiness that only two longtime foes could manage.
で、なんでそんな話したのよ。
は？
は？
半年前のここの事件をなんで彼に話したのよ。
ああ、そっちか。いや、あいつがバカなこと口走ったからなんだが。
He stopped himself before he said any more. He knew better than to let slip the fact that Sojiro had a thing for Aoko. Everyone knew guys didn't sell each other out like that, even if it was all, in truth, a misunderstanding.
それより、さっきのはないんじゃねえのか、青崎。お前、宗十郎に恨みでもあんの
？7日以上前の恨みを引きずるほど、私はお姫様じゃないつもりだけど。
He wanted to retort that she was more like a queen than a princess, but he'd come to know her too well over the past 2 years to dig himself into a hole like that.
恨みはないね。それにしちゃ恋に喧嘩売ってただろ。なんでだ。確かに調子の狂うやつだが、あいつほどいいやつはいねえだろうに。おい待て、なんだその足元のシロアリを見るかのような態度は。
別にあんたまでそのセリフを言うのかって心底から見下げ果てただけよ。
Damn.
まあいっか。いいやつ、いい人、結構じゃない？喧嘩を売る相手としちゃ上等だわ。誰も憎んであげないなら私ぐらいそうしないとね。
She said casually, having regained her composure.
しないとねって、お
前。Tobimaru could not follow her reasoning at all. Tobimaru was used to Ako's erratic trains of thought, but hating Sojiro for no reason seemed needlessly cruel. His friend's naive, innocent face came to mind, and then he blurted.
けど、宗十郎は青崎が好きなんだぜ。それでも嫌いなのか？
His vow of silence had lasted not even 2 minutes.
いや、今のはな、青崎。
He tried to take it back, but it was too late. She had heard his words loud and clear. All he could hope for now was that she would take it well.
そりゃそうでしょう。好き嫌いは誰にもあるし。けどこればかりはね、彼が私と仲良くしたいって言っても、私は嫌いなんだから仕方ない。
Stone Cold Aoko. Tobimaru found himself filled with indignation at how detached Aoko was being.
いや、そんなお友達感覚の話じゃなくてだな。そういう好き嫌いじゃなくて、その字は本気でお前に惚れてるって言ったんだよ。
He showed at his face the embodiment of sincerity. Aoko gave him a blank stare. It was the face of someone who had lost their wallet hours earlier and was only just realizing it now. The first instant of doubt that ushers in the reality of the situation, but an instant is all it was. De? She answered coolly, as if she had no idea why it should matter to her at all.
でときたか。鬼でもなけりゃ悪魔だな。お前って女は。よかろう。聞こえなかったのならもう一度言ってやる。
Tobimaru gave up any pretense of masculine solidarity and fired back hard.
いいわよそんなの。つまらないもの。
She ruthlessly cut him off. Thinking of the boys who still harbored unrequited love for Aoko, Tobimaru tried hard to come up with a name befitting the demoness in front of him.
なるほどね。それでさっきの話に結びつくわけだ。へえ。柄にもなく友達思いじゃない？殿下。そりゃそうでしょう。好き嫌いは誰にもあるし。
I pressed the button by accident. Wait, did it go back?
けどこればかりはね。彼が私と仲良くしたいって言っても。
I pressed the button by accident. I went back a little bit. Oops.
で？
で？
いい？なるほどね。それでさっきの話に結びつくわけだ。
There we go. We're back on where we were before.
柄にもなく友達思いじゃない？殿下。
Pororo. I just want to check something. I just saw a notification of something. Oh yeah, this is fine. I got a notification that OBS had disconnected. I got scared about that for a moment. Okay, we could have... Okay, there we go.
ってことは、聞くも無残、語るも無情っていう私の噂話、教えてあげたんでしょ？
She laughed as a fiendish smile adorned her face. Tobimaru repented to God, whoever and wherever he or she might be, for ever bringing up Aoko's love life.
飛び丸にしちゃ正しい判断ね。褒めてあげるから、どんな話をしたのか聞きたいな、私。
Damn. She was smiling, but Tobimaru wished she'd at least try to hide the bloodlust.
代表作とここでの事件を2つばかり。
Aoko nodded with satisfaction as she listened to Tobimaru's hesitant answer.
こういう時、噂話って便利よね。うるさいのを追っ払ってくれるから。でも、そんな話を考えなしで広めたら大変だから、これからは気をつけてね。
Had this been in writing, the chillingly sweet tone of her words could have been signed with a heart. Whether angry or happy, Aozaki spoke in a disturbingly cute manner when she was in a heightened emotional state. Tobimaru took note of this new discovery, aware that it did nothing to get him out of this situation.
ああ、俺も命は惜しいからな。口はもう滑らねえよ。けどよ、青崎。本気で宗十郎が嫌いなのか?
He knew that it was a topic he would be better off avoiding, but he tried asking anyway. The bonds between men at times shine more beautifully than a pearl. Damn.
まあ好きじゃないから嫌いっていうわけじゃないけど、私が彼のことを嫌う理由は自分でもわからない。だからダメなのね、きっと。
Perhaps to placate Tobimaru, Aoko paused in contemplation before she answered, giving it a moment without immediately blurting out a response meant that not even he could complain.
そうか。まあ、そういうことならしょうがねえか。
しょうがない。
何しろ、きれいさっぱり感情論だ。お互い理由もなく好きと嫌いじゃ手を貸す隙間もねえわけだし。
Thinking that would be the end of it, Tobimaru looked up toward the ceiling and silently apologized to Sojiro. However, his final sentence appeared to have piqued Aoko's interest.
待って、今のどういう意味？
Her fox cheer had vanished. Failing to pick up on this, Tobimaru answered nonchalantly.
いや、あいつもさ、青崎に惚れた理由がわからないなんて言いやがってな。ああ、違ったか。理由なんてないなんて意味だったかな。
Tobimaru was still in disbelief that Sojiro had been charmed by Aoko's appearance, so he purposely left that part out.
理由はないですって。
ああ、なんで俺がいくらお前の噂話をしても無駄だった。天津さえなんて言ってたかな。そうそう、理由はどうあれ青崎の心配は本物なんだとか、自分はそれで助かってるとか、俺なんかには言えないセリフだったのは確かだね。どうにもはっきりしてんのは他の野郎どもと違って、噂を聞いても手を引く素振りなんざみじんもなかったってことだけ。
Tobimaru finally noticed the shift in Aoko's demeanor. He was scowling at the wall. She glared at it in silence like it was her worst enemy, and this continued for several minutes. Damn.
何それ？さっきといいそれといい、どこかで聞いたようなことばっかり。
So great was her ire that the gnashing of her teeth was audible. Damn. The irritation seeded until it reached the point that Aoko forgot Tobimaru was even in the room. Tobimaru looked heavenward for forgiveness, sensing that he'd brought further calamity down upon Sojiro's head. Poor Sojiro.
少しわかったわ。なんであいつが気に食わないのか。
Tobimaru looked away as if to indicate that he'd rather not know, but Aoko ignored him and began to grumble venomously.
あいつ、私が嫌いなやつと言動が似てるのよ。誰彼構わずいい人扱いされるところとか、妙にふわふわしてるところとか、いちいち私の勘に触るところとか。
Glancing idly up at the clock, Tobimaru thought the last part just sounded like misplaced anger. And that was that. 1 o'clock had come and gone.
わかった。もういい。この話をした俺が悪かった。で、俺に用ってのはなんだよ。言っとくけど、もう授業始まってるぜ。
え？授業って？なんで？いつ？
いや、さっき総の字が出てってから、青崎がギラーンって壁に睨んでた時にチャイムが鳴ったんだよ。いいのか、生徒会長。5次元目ばっくれて。
Oh, damn.
いいわけないでしょ！なんで黙ってんのよ、あんたは！
She looked like she was on the verge of tears as she shouted and pulled at his necktie. Tobimaru raised his hand in mock surrender a gesture reserved only for the true victor.
蚊の方がエレガントなんて言いやがった仕返しだ。思い知るがいい。男の純情を踏みにじったり焼き殺したりするエリート悪魔め。
相変わらず細かく根に持つ男。言動には言動で返しなさいよね、卑怯者。
Damn. She tightened his necktie around his neck with a yank. The vice president smiled a thuggish grin, as if her reaction made his victory that much sweeter.
お前の古典が破滅に向かっているのは周知の事実。そして A 組の5次元目は言うまでもない。藤代のばあさん。青崎のこと嫌ってるしな。
Fujishiro had one of the longest tenures at the school, so it was only natural she would be in charge of teaching the classics.
さあ、こんなところで俺のネクタイを引っ張る余裕があるのなら、急いで自分の教室に立ち返るがいい。情けだ。別に止めはしねえよ。
くそ、あんたなんかにはめられるなんて。このまま死んでしまえ。
Damn. She choked him even harder with his necktie. As Aoka put words into action and mercilessly strangled Tobimaru, he saw his life flash before his eyes again. Again, what did I say again?
待て待て、本当に死んじまうだろうが。今ならまだ間に合う。10分過ぎたら遅刻から欠席扱いだぞ。
Damn. Aoko glanced up at the clock. It was still only 7 past 1. Her route was from the student council room on the 2nd floor to the Class A classroom on the 3rd floor. If she ran, she could make it.
命拾ったわね、飛び丸。
Damn, Aoko clicked her tongue disappointedly. What disturbed Tobimaru was that it didn't sound like an empty threat.
あと放課後、ここにいて。頼みたいことがあるのは本当なんだから。
She was halfway out of the room before she even finished her sentence. Finally, all alone, Tobimaru closed the open door, locked it, and slumped into a chair.
たく、ああしてる分には楽しいやつなんだけどよ。青崎は。
He leaned back in the creaky folding chair and let out a sigh. The weather outside was beautiful, but the sunlight waned early in the winter. Before long, daylight would fade, and the unheated student council room would grow colder and colder. All of the good equipment, like the heater, had ended up in the main office, so he had no choice but to settle in for a chilly afternoon.
こんな天気が続けばいいんだがね。天気予報じゃまた雲行き怪しいって話だが。
After his somewhat suggestive monologue, Tobimaru's mind drifted. He idly wondered to himself whether Sojiro was an overcast day or a clear day sort of guy, but no answers came. I mean, if you ask him, he would probably say that it doesn't mind either way, right? The school day over, Sojiro headed straight to his job. While the school had approved his jobs at the Chinese restaurant and fish market in Misaki's shopping district, it was other work he hadn't mentioned to them. And it was not because he knew that they would complain at him working too many, but rather because of the illicit nature of one job in particular. Illicit? Today, his workplace was a pachinko parlor in front of Yashirogi Station. Oh, so George changed out of his school uniform and into a black fox tuxedo uniform, then began cleaning the storefront. Yashirogi was the jewel of Misaki City, a busy place with a vast assortment of commercial centers and shopping arcades. Where there were people en masse, there were products made en masse. A romantic might describe it as a place of joy. A realist would note the free enterprise, and a cynic would point at all the garbage. Local authorities had attempted to beautify Yashirogi, but there was one basic tenet of society they could not overcome. This establishment was the embodiment of that role. Business such as this attracted the dregs of society, and as such, the front of the parlor had to be cleaned several times a day. Sojiro stood outside in the winter cold, sweeping used-up cigarette butts, picking up discarded flyers, and tossing empty cans into the trash. Something about it must have reminded him of mountain life, because he cheerfully finished the job with ease. After making sure the storefront was acceptably clean, he returned to the inside of the parlor where it was nice and warm. Blinding lights, deafening sounds, and the oppressive odor of tobacco assaulted him as he passes through the parlor on his way to the office.
店長、外回りの掃除終わりました。
はい、ご苦労様。それでいいかな。2階の40番台のお客さんの様子見てきてくれない？どうも懐に飲んでそうなんだよね。あのお姉さん。
Damn. His boss was a good-natured man who used to work a desk job. The reason he employed someone like Sojiro, even though he was clearly a student, was not because he admired him for working his way through school. It was because all of the other employees were scary and intimidating, so he wanted at least one employee who was not.
いいんですか？トイレの掃除まだですけど。
いいのいいの。なんかね、カメラの死角にいるんでいまいち確証取れないの。
Oof. You know there's a blind spot and you... okay. And you haven't solved that issue?
そうちゃん、今のところ的中率 100% でしょ。様子見てきてくれないかな。
Hearing that, Sojiro put away his cleaning equipment and headed upstairs. It was a typically large-scale pachinko parlor with 2 floors. It prided itself on being a local establishment that was satisfied with taking the locals' money little by little without resorting to more exploitative means. But regardless of the parlor's intentions, its customers were not so scrupulous. Among them were casual players, professional gamblers, and cheaters looking to profit by exploiting whatever loopholes they could find. Of particular prevalence was a device developed in the mid-80s that could disrupt a machine's circuitry from the outside, making it much easier to get what was called a 777 jackpot. As much as the parlor wanted to deny these cheaters entry, they needed to present hard evidence of cheating or risk losing customers. Particularly in the service industry, innocent until proven guilty was not a rule taken lightly. As a result, they could only punish the customers they caught in the act. Such cheaters were known as gotoshi, a slice of society with which Sojiro knew nothing about. What he did know was that they were inconveniencing his employer and violating the rules. Water. He went upstairs. The radio and game machine sounds on the second floor were quieter than the cacophony downstairs. There were 100 game machines on the ground floor and over 80 on the second. While there were some empty seats here and there, it was a solid evening turnout. The machine mentioned by his boss was in the center aisle. Sojiro nonchalantly leaned back against the wall and watched the customer hit the jackpot over and over again. Oh, hello. The second he saw her, his gut told him that she was not cheating. He still was not sure what made someone a master swindler, but if it meant they were special, this woman certainly fit the description. It was almost as if he could feel the luck emanating from her. As the customer looked on, she silently turned the handle again and again. She appeared older than Sojiro. She wore a green, form-fitting one-piece dress. A pair of stockings covered her legs. Her slender legs were gracefully crossed, and her elegance suited a painting better than a casino. Her dark, reddish hair was cut short in a bob, perfectly framing her stylish spectacles and crimson lips. Truth be told, something was off about this picturesque beauty ringing the jackpot over and over again. 4 boxes worth of pachinko balls sat at her feet, and her winning streak showed no sign of abating. She looked bored as her slender porcelain fingers lifted a long cigarette to her lips. And... just as that thought crossed his mind, her gaze turned toward the wall and Sojiro. Suddenly a chill ran down his spine. He reflexively covered his mouth to keep from shrieking.
あの人、昨日の。
Oh. Acting on pure instinct, Sojiro took off running. He headed straight downstairs, desperate to not be on the same floor as her. He would have run straight out the door, but for his obligations to his job.
店長、早退します。それと、2階の人は問題ないです。
He tried to keep his composure as he spoke. I can't read. Jamming his school uniform into a paper bag as he ran out of the parlor. Damn, he is running. Cloudy weather brought the shadow of night over Yashirogi as he ran through the shopping arcade toward the station. He shot up the long staircase like an arrow, quickly pulled his train pass from his wallet, and passed through the ticket gate. The ticket gate was crowded with people standing around, walking and talking. The station attendant by the automatic ticket machine had an unpleasant look on his face. There was now a familiar, comforting hustle and bustle around him. Just another day in the city. Nothing like what he witnessed the night before. He could finally breathe again. The momentary rush of release brought him to an abrupt stop. He nervously turned around. There was no way that dangerous individual could be behind him.
考えてみると。
He couldn't think of a good reason for why he'd fled so desperately. As far as he could remember, he hadn't even seen the threat's face long enough to form an opinion about her. Sojiro gave himself a good slap on the cheek to pull himself together and quickly made his way down to the platform. Unfortunately, the next train was 10 minutes away, and panicking would do him no favors, so he quietly found an empty seat and sat down. He took another deep breath. He was surrounded by people waiting for the train just like he was, and no sign of anyone pursuing him. His head finally cleared up, and he assured himself that he was overthinking things, though he was surprised at how heavy his shoulders felt.
疲れてるのは分かってる。自分の体のことだし。
Sojiro sighed at his greater than expected fatigue. He had certainly struggled since coming down from the mountains, but in retrospect, it could have been worse. Physically, he was probably holding up fine. He was much less confident in his mental state. The city and the mountains could not have been more different. He had been slow to recognize the differences and adapt. Acclimation was simple enough. Humans were nothing if not adaptable. Even without any effort, one would learn to adjust over time. Recognizing the challenges had been the hard part.
そりゃ、とにかく難しいことだらけだし。
Sojiro grumbled a complaint he'd never uttered before. To be honest, he was still afraid to wander around town. There were so many things city people took for granted that Sojiro had yet to grasp. It was little wonder that this never-ending chain of surprises would wear on him.
疲れてるのは体じゃないのか。だからあんな幻を見る。
Hallucination. He muttered to himself, then shook his head. That which exists, exists. Such was the way of all things. Tobimaru had called it an hallucination, but Sojiro knew what he saw was real. The city was a magical kingdom compared to the mountains. If there were real magicians secretly living here, that should have been no surprise at all. The thought alone made his legs tremble. It took him a moment longer to realize that they were quivering out of fear. He had feared the unnatural ever since he encountered a wild bear on a mountain path as a child.
いや、あれはこんなもんじゃなかったっけ。なりふり構わず泣き叫んだもんな、あの時は。
Sojiro smiled a little as he recalled his traumatic childhood memory. Anyone who had fainted at the sudden appearance of a growling beast that towered over 6 feet tall. The monster in the movie that Sojiro saw not 2 days ago was the equivalent of a cuddly stuffed animal when compared to the wild mountain creatures. He was reminded that he'd faced far worse before, and his ordeal now was nothing he could but something he could endure. I can't read.
そうだよな。今の問題はとちらっと聞こえた最後のセリフか。捕まえて始末するっていうのはどうなんだ。
At face value, the meaning was obvious, but the implications were simply too frightening to contemplate seriously. Perhaps he had misheard the words, or perhaps the speaker had
都
misspoke.
会のルール。誰かがきっと罰しに来る。
Even as he said it, the idea didn't feel quite real. It was hard to imagine that it applied to him. Sojiro breathed and closed his eyes. His vision dimmed, putting the illuminated cityscape out of sight and out of mind. For now, he resolved to put last night's events behind him. When he opened his eyes, his breathing had
それでさ
calmed.
青崎を殴りつけようとして結局どうなったんだ飛び丸。
The question suddenly popped into Sojiro's head. He decided he would ask next time and stood up from his chair. A long street of light blazed by, announcing the arrival of the next train. Nice. Oh, okay. So that was chapter 2, I guess. I mean, I still have 20 minutes, but I think since we just finished chapter 2, I think it's good for me to just end here. I could like do one chapter per stream, depending on the size of it, of course. The later chapters probably gonna get longer, but either way, since we already got to the end of it, I might as well just end the link here. There's still like 20 minutes until we hit 2 hours, which is what I tend to stream for, but since we already ended, I think it's good to end here. Water. A bit earlier than usual, but it's fine. I'll be back next Wednesday to continue more with this. And Monday, as usual, I'm gonna be playing more Silk Song. So yeah, I'll be back next week. Monday for Silk Song, and then Wednesday for more Witch on the Holy Night. This chapter was a bit shorter than I anticipated, but that's fine. But yeah, pretty interesting so far. I like how they mentioned about the mages, since I am a fan of Fate, so I know that mages hiding among people is a thing in the world of Fate, at least. I'm sure this is connected as well, so it's funny to see them mention that not only once but multiple times as well. So far, pretty interesting story, but we'll see where it evolves to. It probably will start dabbling in the whole magic stuff as well. Either way, I'm gonna be ending here for tonight. Let me just check something. Yeah, why not? I'm gonna do a raid for Pro. Because why not? Since he's live, I might as well. So yeah, I'm gonna be ending here for tonight. Thank you for watching. Thank you for anybody who dropped by. I'll see you guys next stream. Monday for more Silk Song, and then Wednesday for more Witch on the Holy Night. And yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.